Some Boston Celtics news and rumors coming your way from the AGT squad. Harrison and Chase with you. Producer Jack Lotteray, the Boston sports fan as well, rocking with us. Let's talk about some trade rumors. How about Terrence Ross, Chase, a player who was the only Magic player that didn't get dealt last year at the deadline. It was the classic Will Smith meme where he returns home and there's nothing in the house because Vucevic and all his boys got traded. Well, he's still in Orlando, but many believe he will be on the trade block this year because Orlando's continuing to rebuild. He is under contract through next year, by the way, for only like $11 million, a pretty team-friendly contract, so he's got some value. Having a bit of a down year, but some 3-and-D upside for a Boston team that we both feel needs to make some kind of move.
I think they just need to shake it up just a bit. Obviously, to epic proportions, it would be trading away Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. I don't think we've arrived at that scenario
Especially
just yet, although
Ross.
It's starting to get a little bit more hairy. I know some Celtics fans are scarred from an NBA trade deadline trade with the Magic last year for Evan Fournier, who really was just okay for Boston. He's been a disaster for the New York Knicks, so thankfully Boston didn't re-sign him. Ross, for what his contract is, him being affordable, the player that he is, the value that he has, and the fact that he's under contract this year and next year would be a nice little spark for the Boston Celtics, and I don't think you'd need to give up all that much for Terrence Ross. He's averaging around 12 points per game. He's a solid player, not a great player, and he's a guy for the Orlando Magic who I think his numbers are inflated just a bit because the Orlando Magic are just a bad squad, but intangibles, effort, energy, athleticism, a little bit of positional versatility. I wouldn't hate it for Boston depending on what you're giving up. And if you only have to part ways with like a 7th, 8th, 9th guy off the bench or maybe one of the underperforming young players, wouldn't be a bad move for Boston to try to move the needle just a little bit and insert some energy in what has been a pretty stagnant Celtics team this year.
Yeah, Ross's splits are a little down this year as a shooter. His prior 2 years averaged a few more points, was more efficient, especially from three. But we've kind of seen that throughout the NBA. A lot of guys are having to adjust to the new ball, the new rules this year. Maybe that's impacted Ross just a little bit. Maybe the fact that he's on arguably the worst team in the NBA has impacted his play as well. We see that especially with guys who don't want to be on current teams, and I think that probably applies to a guy like Terrence Ross. So an opportunity to play in Boston could be something welcomed for him. What do you guys think? Should the Celtics trade for Terrence Ross, type T for trade, type P for pass? I don't know if this is the move I'd make, but I'm doing something if I'm Brad Stevens. This is a big trade deadline for him in his first year as a president of basketball operations, so that'll be very fascinating to watch. How about bringing in DeMarcus Cousins, Chase, who got cut, got let go by Milwaukee, in a bit of a surprising move as he was playing fairly well for the Bucks, a team certainly contending in the East. In his freedom now, in his Cantor freedom, he's just been okay this year off the bench. I think you could argue Cousins could give you similar production, especially offensively, than what Cantor Freedom has.
Yeah, it comes down to this. Like, do you want a better, bulkier big man than Enes Freedom? And is that better big man DeMarcus Cousins? Now, you have the high flyer, uber athlete in Robert Williams. You have the floor spacer with some positional versatility and a now Horford, who's still at this point wonderful basketball IQ, great defensive player, can stretch the floor more so than any other big man on this roster. And Freedom really has just been okay. But you're looking at DeMarcus Cousins and you're like, this guy's been bad for so long. In fact, I thought he was able to kind of resurrect his career to a certain degree. He's pretty good in Milwaukee.
Yeah, he wasn't bad in Milwaukee at all. I thought he flashed a bit for the Clippers in the playoffs last year. I mean, Ty Lue turns to him after not playing for a while in a couple of those games in the conference finals, and he played pretty well overall. I mean, listen, this is not the guy who at one point might have been on a Hall of Fame trajectory. Those days are behind him, too many injuries. But can he be a guy that gives you 8 to 12 points and 5 or 6 boards in 20 minutes a game? I think it's possible. 47% from the field, that's the most efficient he's been in years, by the way. So, and by the way, he hasn't had a notable injury in a couple years now. So, all of a sudden, again, the injuries have, hindered him in terms of like explosiveness, how efficient he can be, but they aren't flaring up again, which is a good thing.
That's a good thing.
So again, if you're a Boston fan, we're not sitting here saying, man, you get Boogie Cousins, you're going to make a jump into the top 3 or 4 in the East, but can he be a guy that eats some minutes? Maybe he's an upgrade over a couple of other players. I at least think that's something worth exploring if you are the Boston Celtics, who kind of just continue to stay stuck in neutral, hovering around 500 almost midway through the season. Name a player the Celtics should sign or trade for before the trade deadline. Got about 5 weeks until then. Any names that jump out to you that you'd like to see Boston go after?
Bradley Beal,
you
Damian Lillard.
Swinging big?
I'd be swinging big, but you'd have to part with one of your marquee superstars.
I think that's the internal battle right now with Boston. Do they go get like a number 3, number 4 type, or do they trade one of their big guns?
And the other thing, too, if you don't want to trade one of your marquee players for another marquee superstar, those middle-tier guys, who do you have on the team that can move the needle? Is it Dennis Schroder, who we're about to talk about? Could it be a Peyton Pritchard or Robert Williams and Aaron Nesmith or Romeo Langford? Like, those guys just don't move.
Marcus Smart
the
is
needle
overpaid.
For me. Marcus Smart overpaid.
Let's talk Schroder, and I think he could be that guy because he's been very productive and he's cheap.
Yep.
Teams like cheap, productive players, and that is what Dennis Schroder has been this year. I mean, you could argue he's been their 3rd most consistent player after their top 2 guys in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So there is some thought maybe that Schroder could be a guy that gets moved in some kind of facilitation to help bring back a good player. I mean, he's not going to get you a big-time player, but if you're thinking, okay, he's probably going to get some money this offseason, we're going to lose him anyway, why not trade him, get something in here, maybe get a guy who's under contract beyond this season to help out the rest of your roster. Look, could you get a late first-round pick, too? Like, if you don't want to get a piece, dude, 15, 16 points. Teams do not value late first-round picks.
No,
in the
they
NBA.
don't.
They really don't.
They don't.
I mean, look, every team LeBron is on, they trade their first-round picks. I mean, it's just how it goes. You don't think LeBron would like Schroder right now instead of Russell Westbrook?
Yeah.
I promise you he would. Teams out there would give you something for Dennis Schroder. I really do think that.
Especially a team out there that is kind of on the cusp of going from being like a good team to a great team that can actually contend for a championship. And Schroder does have some value at that contract. He does not have value if he were still on, or if he ended up signing, rather, that $84 million contract with the Los Angeles Lakers. Like, this is what I know about the Celtics, and I've watched them a lot this year. They're so up and down. They're so Jekyll and Hyde. They're so inconsistent. They just aren't right. Yeah. And they need to make a move to change things up just a bit. We're talking about Boston here. We're talking about 17 titles. We're talking about some of the all-time greats. We're talking about one of the best franchises in the entire world of professional sports. And for them to be floating around 500 now the last 2 years, it is not good enough.
The mistake the Celtics made this offseason was thinking that forcing Danny Ainge into retirement, promoting Brad Stevens to president of basketball ops, and hiring a new coach
would fix
things. Look, coaching matters. Front offices matter. They don't matter as much in the NBA, though, as they do in the NFL. There's 5 players on the court. It's a players' league. You got to have guys. And they have 2. But that's kind of it, man. Like, they just don't have the right nucleus of players. I'm not going to sit here and question Ime Udoka's coaching ability. I think the guy can coach. I just don't think they have the roster, man.
Yeah.
I think that's – you watch them play, it's like this team is discombobulated. Like, they don't play with any rhythm whatsoever. It just becomes the Tatum ISO or the Brown ISO
That's
show.
it.
I mean, that's it. And – when you have even like you think about those Warriors teams, Steph, KD, Clay, like they're moving the ball, man, and this team it just doesn't do that. Like you said, they're just off. I don't know what the problem is at the end of the day, but we'll continue to bring you some more Celtics news and rumors. We haven't had as many videos recently, holiday season, but with the trade deadline just over a month away, I can promise you this.
Producer Jack going to be churning out videos.
We will have you guys cover with some more
Pressure's
videos.
On you,
Producer Jack is taking it on as a challenge, so slide in his DMs at Jack Lotteret. If you can spell it, I'll give you $1. YouTube.com/CelticsTV.